Hello and welcome to another sped up version of a live stream that happened yesterday. And this is just the preliminary coloring of an 11 by 17 tabloid size piece of glossy cardstock. It's a pretty simple composition in terms of the number of stamps, the number of kind of different areas of this scene. It just so happens to be a lot of impressions using the same stamps throughout. I don't work in this size very often at all. I can't remember the last time I did an 11 by 17 scene. I might have done one the previous year, maybe two at the most. I don't know, maybe someone can correct me on that, but I certainly don't remember doing more than maybe 5 11 by 17s in my entire life, okay? I kind of oscillate back and forth between using a similar type of strategy when coloring this scene. In terms of the number of areas of a light source, okay, I keep it pretty simple as far as that goes, but just the sheer amount of texture and imagery in this kind of, I don't know, it makes me think of some potential strategies by which to approach this, okay? And like I said, I don't do this too often, so I'm just kind of feeling my way through it, okay? So, okay, when I'm approaching a scene like this, I want to kind of simplify things for myself, so I'm laying down a base coat of the same color. In this case, it happens to be the Memento London Fog, which is, I'd say it's about a 15% gray, something like that. And Memento inks happen to be, in terms of the viscosity, fairly thick inks. All right, so it's going to spread around on this piece fairly easily. Okay, now like I said, glossy cardstock here, okay? And these inks have been allowed to dry about 2 days or so. They are completely dry, but going into it with this London fog, I did experience some smearing of imagery, okay? Now, dye inks work by staining the surface, but that being said, they did stain, you know, because we can obviously see these images in here, but I re-inked my black ink before I stamped out this scene, before I did the stamp sketch, because I just wanted to have very dark impressions. So there's some residual dry ink on the surface, and that's the thing that's kind of smearing. But one of the things that I was explaining to my live stream viewers when doing this is, you know, I don't worry about smearing like that. Now, if I am absolutely, you know, smearing the image and it's becoming, you know, it's going from like a 98% gray, you know, which is practically black, and I'm just absolutely wiping it off, that would be worrisome, and, you know, we would have to allow it to dry more or heat set it or something of that sort. Or instead of kind of making, utilizing a streaking approach with this, in this case, a paper towel here, I would do more dabbing up and down, and then you wouldn't have so much of that smearing type of effect happening throughout here. Okay, so when I'm coloring in here and I'm adding a base coat, okay, it doesn't mean I'm coloring everything with this, in this case, London fog, okay? You're coloring the scene, you're shading, but you're also retaining some areas of light, okay? So on those mountains, there might be some mountains that are a little bit lighter, you know, some of the peaks are lighter. And that would be representative of just the different way light is being cast on those mountains. There might be some clouds, you know, and the light is coming through some breaks in the clouds, etc. Okay? All right, so continuing to add on some tone here. I think I moved over to the blue summer sky. It doesn't look blue, but it's kind of a little bit of a cooler gray here. I think. You can't even tell sometimes because as I'm applying these inks, it's mixing with the previous inks, so some of that blue might have some gray in it. And also, you know, some of that imagery continues to kind of wipe off with these applications. So as I move into my blue tones, it just becomes a little bit more of a kind of a cool gray look to it. It's not like we see this crystalline blue, you know, color kind of appearing all of a sudden. But what you're doing is you're just kind of reiterating your areas that you've established with your first color, your shadow areas, the areas you've toned in. Try to retain those areas of light throughout this entire process, okay? Now you might decide, oh, okay, I left a little bit of this area too light, you know, to my eye. Yeah, you know, by all means, go ahead and, you know, alter the surface, darken it in accordingly. All right, so just continuing to go on, see how I'm using that paper towel like that, and just going in and toning in the perimeter in this case. In this case, I really want to tone in the perimeter to really contain the scene. I mean, this is a really big scene, so the same concept in terms of containment and framing go on with a big scene like this. Just the same as it would with a very small scene, maybe a domino or a standard card size at a quarter page 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, okay? And also, when you're adding these tones like this, what you're doing is you're decreasing the contrast between some of the imagery and the paper in some areas, so it doesn't look so busy, okay? So that's one of my main kind of goals when coloring a scene. Just stamping them in black ink on white paper. I mean, you could do a very simple type of finishing touch, you know, just coloring them a little bit. But usually I like to really frame my scenes off to really contain them and make them look like kind of a world unto themselves, okay? Not just a kind of a slice of a greater whole. My illustration teacher taught us to approach our paintings, our drawings, as if it were a stage, and you know, whatever's within that the confines of our, you know, the dimensions of our pieces, you're saying that that's a complete statement and it doesn't lack for anything, okay? So that's the way I tend to approach my scenes, my cards, no matter how, you know, what the size they are. They could be an inchie and they would still have a little bit of a border around them. Okay, we're going in with some brighter blues here. I believe this is the Caribbean blue. But the Caribbean blue on white paper is quite different than the Caribbean blue over the top of gray, all right? So it just has a little bit of a different tinge. Actually, this is the Bahama blue right here, so another memento, okay? And you see it's just kind of changing a little bit. It's a very minor kind of jump in value, but you can see the hue and temperature change occurring with this color, you know, before it was just grayscale. I was mentioning to my viewers that you don't really even need the pad when you're buying some inks. We were talking about, you know, how many different colors of blue people have. Okay, this is the Caribbean blue here. Super juicy, because I re-inked it before I went live with this video, because I knew I would have a lot of area to fill in, so I re-inked this Caribbean blue because it's one of my favorite blues and it gives the surface a really bright crystalline blue look and surface. Alright, see, I'm still trying to retain that light area within that space in there, okay? It's a little bit too kind of open. It looks like it could really use some, a little bit of tinge of blue. So here I am kind of swiping into it, kind of with a dry version of that Caribbean blue, okay? Don't go into it with a super sopping wet one, otherwise you'll kind of eradicate all of your, in this case, what it represents, reflected light, okay? Alright, so trying to assess this space in here, I can kind of tell what's going on, but again, it's just a very large scene, so, you know, there's just so much more space to consider, you know, when looking at this. And like I said, it's the equivalent of 8 quarter page cards, so yeah. It's a little bit harder to conceive, roughly conceive what it's going to look like in the end, just with so much space to cover. Okay, going in with the number 10 blue here from Marvy. It's just called light blue, okay? It's a little bit different. And remember, the page is starting to get a little bit saturated with ink and moisture, so as I apply these incrementally darker tones, they're not applying very quickly because the paper isn't kind of absorbing those applications that we're applying. Again, because it's kind of moving towards supersaturation, okay? But, you know, as I'm talking and, I don't know, blabbing in my live streams, the page is setting up. The inks are setting up and absorbing in. They're drying via evaporation, etc. So here we are going with another color. I don't know, it's a different color of distress ink. I forgot which one it was. There's some blues that I don't use too often because they're really similar to other blues that I'm already using, but this is such a big piece, I thought, why not? You know, I had the rainker right there. Okay, so this is, I think this is the Prussian blue here. It's a much, much darker ink, but again, the page in that blue area is really getting close to supersaturation, so not applying too quickly. I wish it would dry a little bit faster, but I don't want it to dry so fast that it's hard to apply a smooth application of whatever color I'm working with. So that's the trade-off. Real damp and everything, it's kind of hard to apply, or it's very slow to apply, I should say, not hard. But on the other hand, it spreads very evenly, and it's very user-friendly. You can put in a gigantic blob of some ink, and you can spread it around, no problem. All right, now going in with another color. Okay, then maybe this one was the Prussian blue here. The Prussian blue tends to be a little bit of a thinner ink, so it penetrates the thicker ones faster. I don't know, there's something to these really dark blues. I don't know why, but something like the Blueprint Sketch ink from Distress is really, really dark, as is this Prussian blue. I always mention that the Prussian blue, when used in its full saturation, is almost black. It's the closest to black blue that I know of. Okay, so this is going in with some very light antique linen distress ink color, okay? And what I was mentioning to my viewers is that all of those areas of white within the space, I mean, that represents light, either the light source or reflected light, okay? And I like that, but it was looking a little bit too stark white, so this is a little trick that you can do. You can go in with a warm tone, a very light one. Oh, antique paper, you know, this linen one. So one of those kind of really pale distress inks are really perfect for that. Memento has some other kind of warm tone, desert sand, you know, colors that you can use as well. I tend to go with this antique linen because it has a little bit more yellow in it, so. But you can see where I put it in the water next to that blue, it doesn't really overpower anything. I mean, I could layer it right over the top of that blue if I want to. And it just kind of gives a little bit of a warmer tinge. Now see those rocks on the right side? I've applied some of that linen right on there, and you can kind of compare it to the rocks on the left. It's a little bit different. The gray, I think, looks a little bit richer with a little bit of a change in temperature in there. And in those background mountains, I just thought a little bit of warmth, a very subtle warmth, would look good. And one of the things is too, is this color kind of provides the opportunity for kind of a change in hue going on up at the top. So I wanted to use some pinks and kind of lilac, you know, types of colors up in those mountains. So this warmer tone kind of gave me Oh, the opportunity for an easier application of it, okay? Because this beige-ish tone is a lot of, what it is it's a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow in it, right? And of course, pinks, are like a version of red, or lilac, there's red in purples, right? The combination of blue and pink, right? So you have a component, so it just kind of provided a little bit of a, kind of a intermediate element within that sky to be able to add in purple, to not have it kind of stand out too much. I mean, it would have gone over the gray and the blue too, but just having that little bit of a warmer tinge up there makes the space, or that area, just that much more rich, I think. Okay, this is a very light color that I'm applying right here with the Marvy. But you can see that it's slowly kind of turning a little bit of a purple tinge. That stands out a little bit too much, so I do bring in some of that, I think it's lilac, into other areas, such as on some of the rocks in the distance, and the foreground rocks, and in the water, okay? All right, so kind of changing a little bit by little. I don't look at this incarnation of the scene as looking very good here, okay? It's really when I get to black, when I've stamped out my images in black, that I feel it's really kind of coming together. I don't use like a solid black or anything like that, but I use it for the incarnations of gray that we can achieve by using a black ink and just a drier version of it for the lighter values, okay? But you can see that purple tinge up there now. It doesn't read as, when you look at it, it doesn't say, oh my gosh, look at those, like super purple, mountains up there or something like that. It's fairly subtle, but here's I'm putting in that little streak of that lilac in that space there. So see, that's one of those reasons why you leave and you retain some white of the paper if you want to. You don't have to, but you can go in and add these little, kind of a color linking, hues that are used in other areas, and you can get a pure version of it still if you've retained some of that white of the paper and not just toned everything out, okay? So it works as two reasons, it works as lighting, and then you can do this kind of reiteration of lighting with it in your reflective areas, in this case the water and foreground rocks, okay? All right, the big scene here, one of the things I didn't talk about was the ergonomic aspect of working on something like that. And that's, it's no insignificant thing. What you want to do is you want to just turn your, I hesitate to say card, turn your piece of paper in a direction in which the application of media that you're doing is the most comfortable. So I'm usually just kind of working in the lower area. But how do you get in the top area? Well, you just spin the paper around so that the top is below, in that lower section. Okay, so speaking of continuity and kind of bringing everything together, here's the black ink in here. And see how much that blue ink in that lake really kind of stands out too much? It's overpowering. So I'm coming into it with this black. And then, as I was explaining to the viewers of this video, I'll be coming into it with white as well in the form of the pigment ink and using it as fog. I'll have that as, a really unifying element. Okay, I'm adding some of this black down at the base of those rocks down there. See how it gives them a little bit more kind of mass and volume by adding in that tone like that. It makes those rocks seem a lot more three-dimensional to me. And it kind of anchors down the bottom of the scene as well by giving it a little bit more visual weight with the use of that darker value. All right, so I'm just showing people the difference between the right-hand side and the left-hand side after applying that black in there. Okay. And I'm just mentioning to people also that when you do these little applications of even black ink, a very dark ink potentially, You're not really not applying a full version of it. You're applying some lighter version of it, so it's more like, you know, some version of gray. And the dark you want to go, you just kind of layer it. But, you know, if you want it to go really dark, just build it up as opposed to doing it, you know, in one fell swoop, okay? And it just looks a lot more kind of harmonious and smoothly blended that way. Okay, so here we are, you know, we're doing that little bit of a vignette. The sky itself doesn't get so dark, so I'm not going to use like a full black in the upper left and right corners. It's, you know, just some version of gray. Alright, see that right there? Sorry about all that glare, it's just such a huge scene. Someone asked what I do with these after I'm done, and the answer is really nothing. it's kind of more of an exercise. I mean, it's really hard to mail something like this off. You have to get those really large format mailers for this. Okay, so one of the things I'm thinking about doing is adding in some, you know, some very subtle light beams into this. A lot of pigment ink applications to unify and illuminate some areas and to kind of soften up some of those harsher, sharp edges of the images. And also, I was telling them that I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using some alcohol ink markers to get into some of those areas that are a little bit harder to render out with a, you know, a wadded up paper towel. You know, it's not exactly something that's ideal for detailed areas. So yeah, I'll do that and you know, put on some finishing touches in the third video of this very large piece here. So anyways, that's it for part 2 of this. Hope you enjoyed the process here, and thanks so much for watching.